All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going deep on something you guys have been asking about for a while now.
Yeah, we've gotten a ton of requests for this one.
It's Saudi Arabia, or more specifically, how they're using their wealth and power to, well, exert their influence on a global scale.
Right.
And you guys sent over a bunch of really interesting stuff to get us started.
It's a pretty fascinating mix, too. Not just the typical political stuff, but sports, tech, even how algorithms might be shaping your Twitter feed, all connected to Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. And the main source we're going to be unpacking today is this YouTube video from More Perfect Union. It's called How Saudi Arabia Bought Trump and What They Want.
Catchy title.
Right. I know. So, are you ready to jump into this with me?
Absolutely. I think what's crucial to understand here is that Saudi Arabia is playing a whole new game now.
Oh, yeah.
They're not just content with being the oil powerhouse anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They want a seat at every table,
Mm-hmm.
and they're using their wealth strategically to get there.
Wealth, meaning?
We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. Their sovereign wealth fund is worth a staggering $930 billion.
Whoa. Okay, put that in perspective for me.
Think of it this way. They could theoretically buy every single company on the Fortune 500 list.
Every single one.
Yeah. Think about that for a second.
That is mind-blowing. So, where are they focusing all this money?
Well, one area they've been super aggressive in is sports. Like, incredibly aggressive.
Okay, so like what? Owning teams, stuff like that.
Oh, way more than that.
Yeah.
They've been buying teams, yes, like Newcastle United in the Premier League.
Right, I heard about that.
But they're also launching entire rival leagues, like Livy Golf to compete with the PGA Tour.
No way.
Yeah. And sponsoring tons of events. Formula One, esports,
Yeah.
even the Women's Tennis Association. I mean, the list goes on. It's almost easier to name the sports they haven't invested in.
Wow, it's like a global sports shopping spree.
It kind of is. But here's the thing. It's not just about their love of the game. This is classic sports washing.
Sports washing, so like using sports to...
To clean up their image, basically. You know, distract from all the human rights concerns and controversies surrounding their regime.
Right, yeah, their human rights record is not exactly spotless. Let's just say that.
Exactly. So they're hoping that by associating themselves with these really popular athletes and big global events, they can project a more appealing, modern image to the world.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. It's like they're trying to win people over through sports.
Exactly. It's about gaining soft power, influencing through cultural appeal rather than, hard power.
Right.
We saw Qatar try this with the World Cup, remember?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But Saudi Arabia, they're taking it even further. They're not just hosting events. They're trying to reshape entire sports to fit their interests.
Wow, that's wild. And all this is just one part of the story, because as if sports weren't enough, the video also points out how they're making massive moves in the tech world, too.
Right. It's not just about owning soccer teams. They're also becoming major players in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, the video talks about how Saudi Arabia has poured billions into U.S. tech startups.
Millions, yeah. It's kind of mind-boggling. And their investment in Twitter, that's especially interesting.
Right. The video really goes deep on that. So apparently Saudi's Kingdom Holding Company was a major shareholder in Twitter, like even bigger than Jack Dorsey for a while.
It's crazy, right? But what's even more concerning is that it may have gone way beyond just financial investment. The video alleges that they might have used their position to, spy on dissidents.
Whoa. Really?
Yeah, and maybe even influence decisions within Twitter itself. I mean, it's pretty alarming when you think about it. A foreign government potentially having that much influence over a platform that shapes so much global conversation.
Definitely a bit unsettling. So we've got sports washing, tech influence, and now things are about to get even more interesting because the video really dives into the relationship between Saudi Arabia and, well, Donald Trump.
Yeah, this is where things get really complicated. The video focuses on this very close relationship between Trump, Jared Kushner, and the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman.
Pimp, yes.
Exactly. And it highlights some pretty eyebrow-raising financial dealings that happened, particularly after Trump left office.
Like that $2 billion investment MBS made in Kushner's investment firm right after Trump left the White House.
That's the one. And that particular deal has fueled a lot of speculation. Some people see it as a direct reward for all the favorable policies the Trump administration gave Saudi Arabia.
The video lists a whole bunch of those policies too, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it goes into a lot of detail there. Things like blocking congressional action against the war in Yemen, abandoning the Iran nuclear deal, approving huge arms deals, even ignoring human rights abuses like the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi.
So basically, turning a blind eye to some pretty serious stuff.
It's a pretty compelling case that the video makes. It really makes you think about how personal financial interests might have intertwined with U.S. foreign policy during that time.
Yeah, it's a very tangled web, for sure. So we've got sports, we've got tech, and now this whole web of political and financial ties with the Trump administration. It really seems like Saudi Arabia is pulling strings on a global scale. What do you think their end game is here?
Well, the video suggests that Saudi Arabia is entering a new era of influence. They're not just an oil giant anymore.
Right.
They're actively trying to shape global events.
Hmm.
They're leveraging their wealth to gain real political and economic power, and they're getting a lot bolder with their moves, like pushing for this formal U.S.-Saudi defense pact.
That's a pretty big deal. A defense pact basically obligating the U.S. to come to their defense no matter what.
Exactly, and that raises a whole bunch of new questions.
Oh, for sure. I mean, a U.S.-Saudi defense pact, that's a game changer.
And that's where things get really interesting, because a formal U.S.-Saudi defense pact would be a huge shift in the global landscape. It would essentially be saying to the world that the U.S. is willing to put its military might behind the Saudi regime.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big deal, especially considering some of the, shall we say, controversies surrounding Saudi Arabia's human rights record.
Yeah, we're talking about a country that's been accused of war crimes, silencing dissidents, and having a pretty dismal record on women's rights.
Exactly. So signing a defense pact with them raises some serious ethical and strategic questions.
For sure. And the video highlights this tension really well, especially when it features experts like Matt Duss, who argue that defending the Saudi regime might not even be in America's best interests.
Yeah, because wouldn't it potentially drag the U.S. into conflicts that we don't really need to be involved in? Conflicts that might not even align with our values or our long-term goals?
That's a major concern, and then there's the potential for backlash from the American public.
Oh, totally.
Imagine if U.S. troops were sent to defend the Saudi regime against an attack. Knowing their history could create a huge political firestorm and further erode public trust in the government.
It feels like a lose-lose situation, at least from an optics perspective. And beyond the immediate consequences, what kind of message would this send to the world? The U.S. is supposed to be a champion of democracy and human rights. But then we turn around and sign a defense pact with a country that has a very questionable track record on those very issues.
It definitely creates a perception problem. It could undermine our credibility on the global stage and make it harder to advocate for those values in other parts of the world.
Oh.
It's like we'd be saying one thing but doing another.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential downsides, which seem pretty significant. But are there any potential upsides to a closer U.S.-Saudi relationship? There must be some reason why this is even being considered right.
Well, there are definitely arguments to be made on both sides. Some experts believe that Saudi Arabia could be a valuable partner in the fight against terrorism.
Okay.
They also point to their influence in the Middle East and their potential role in promoting stability in a very volatile region.
So strategically, they're a key player in a part of the world that's incredibly important to the U.S. and its allies.
Exactly. And then there's the economic side of the equation.
Right.
Saudi Arabia is a major player in the global energy market, and strengthening ties could lead to increased cooperation and investment in that sector.
So there's a strategic and economic rationale for maintaining a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia, even if it's a complicated one. It seems like finding the right balance is key here. We can't just ignore their human rights record or turn a blind eye to their actions, but we also can't completely write them off as an ally.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about engaging with them, strategically holding them accountable for their actions, and ensuring that any agreements serve the best interests of both countries, not just the interests of one over the other.
So it's about being clear-eyed about the potential benefits and risks and making informed decisions that reflect our values and our long-term goals. Which brings us to another really crucial point. Saudi Arabia isn't just trying to shape global politics. They're also trying to shape how the world sees them. They're putting a lot of effort into crafting a very specific image.
Right, they've become masters of public relations. They're trying to present themselves as a modern, forward-thinking nation, highlighting things like social reforms and economic diversification.
Like they're making some progressive moves, such as empowering women and opening up their economy. But then you have things like their continued involvement in the war in Yemen and their crackdown on dissent, which paint a very different picture.
Right, it's a mixed bag, and that's why it's so important to be critical and nuanced when we analyze their actions. We can't just blindly accept their PR spin, but we also can't dismiss everything they do as inherently negative.
It's about looking at the full picture, weighing the potential benefits against the risks. and asking tough questions, like how comfortable are we with the level of influence that Saudi Arabia is gaining on the world stage? What are the red flags we should be watching out for? And what can we do to ensure that our own values and interests are being protected?
Those are the kinds of questions that we as informed citizens need to be grappling with. Because here's the reality. Saudi Arabia is a major player on the world stage, and they're not going anywhere. Their actions have ripple effects that we all feel, whether we realize it or not.
So this isn't just some abstract geopolitical issue. It's something that has the potential to directly affect our lives, even if we don't see the connections right away.
Exactly. And that's why this deep dive is so important. It's about understanding those connections, shedding light on the complexities of Saudi Arabia's global ambitions, and empowering ourselves to make more informed decisions about the future.
Because the choices we make today, both individually and collectively, will shape the world of tomorrow. And when it comes to a country as powerful and influential as Saudi Arabia, those choices carry a lot of weight. It's pretty clear that Saudi Arabia is really stepping onto the world stage, but the way they're going about it is causing some debate.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation for them.
Yeah.
They want to be seen as this modern, progressive country, but at the same time, they're trying to hold on to power in a region that's, well, let's just say it's a pretty complicated region with a lot of different forces at play.
Right, like sometimes those two things don't exactly go hand in hand.
Exactly. It's a tough balancing act. And all the while, they're trying to operate in this globalized world, but they're also, holding on to some pretty traditional values and power structures.
It's a lot to juggle, and it feels like all that tension's only going to ramp up as they keep expanding their influence, right? Like they're investing tons of money in technology, they're trying to completely change the world of sports, and they're building closer relationships with powerful countries like the US. It's bold, for sure, but is it really sustainable in the long run?
That's the big question, isn't it? Can they really keep this level of control and influence while the world's changing so rapidly around them? It's a gamble, that's for sure.
A gamble with some really high stakes. And not just for them, for everyone. Their decisions could have ripple effects across the globe, affecting things like oil prices, the stability of the Middle East, even the future of democracy in some parts of the world.
It's true. It's like a chain reaction. They make a move, and the effects can be felt everywhere. And we can't just sit back and watch it unfold. We've got to be aware of the potential consequences, both good and bad, and think about how we're going to respond to all of this.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one country, it's about the kind of world we all want to live in, right? A world where everyone's rights are respected, where information is freely available, and where those in power, well, they use that power responsibly.
You said it. And if we want that kind of world, well, we have to be willing to speak up, to challenge those in power, and to hold them accountable, even if it means having some tough conversations and asking some uncomfortable questions.
It's about making our voices heard and not being afraid to stand up for what we believe in.
Exactly. It's been a really thought-provoking deep dive. Thanks for being here with us, and we hope you've gained some new insights from this.
And this is just the beginning. Keep digging deeper, keep those questions coming, and never stop searching for the truth. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.